My name is Vesperine, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet one, the reliable one, the invisible one. I wasn't born into a bad family, at least not in the way people think when they hear stories like mine. No abuse that leaves bruises, no screaming matches that wake the neighbors. Just a slow drip of being less than, less loved, less important, less worthy. My sister, Calantha, has always been the star. Even her name sounds like it belongs in lights. When we were kids, people used to stop my mother, Seraphine, at the grocery store to comment on how beautiful Calantha was, how poised, how lucky my parents were. They never stopped to say anything about me. And I got used to it. I learned how to fold myself smaller, how to take pride in being dependable, the one who could be counted on to do the hard things, the quiet work, the work that doesn't get noticed until it's gone. I never resented her, not at first. I thought that's just how families worked. Some people are made to shine, some people hold the flashlight, but things started to shift when Calantha got engaged to a man who matched her energy perfectly. Darius. Smooth, polished, always with the right smile. I didn't like him from the beginning. There was something too perfect about him, something performative. But again, I stayed quiet. That's what I was good at. The wedding planning became the center of the universe. The guest list ballooned. The venue went from a small local spot to a castle-like estate 3 counties over. Everything was bigger, and so were the expenses. One night, after my second closing shift at the cafe, I came home to hear my parents in the kitchen with Calantha. I wasn't eavesdropping, I was too tired for that. But I heard my mother's voice, warm and coaxing. "We just need to move some things around," Seraphine said. "It's not like Vesperine's going to need all that money right away." There was a pause. Calantha laughed softly, the way she did when she got what she wanted. "She wouldn't mind," she said. "She's always been so giving." I froze in the hallway. They were talking about my college fund, the money I'd saved from every weekend I spent working, while Calantha went to parties or spa weekends. The money I thought was safe because my father, Laziel, said it was better kept in the family account. Less risky that way, he'd told me. I stood there long enough to hear the decision settle. They weren't asking me. They weren't even considering telling me. The next morning, over coffee, I brought it up. Casual, testing the waters. "Hey, I was thinking about tuition. I'll need to get the transfer sorted soon." My mother looked up from her planner, her smile too bright. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll handle it." But I saw the flicker. The too quick glance exchanged between Seraphine and Laziel. The way Calantha didn't even look up from her phone. That's when the sinking feeling started. A quiet panic, like standing on a frozen lake and hearing the first crack beneath your feet. I told myself it couldn't be true. They wouldn't do that, would they? A few days later, I logged into the account. I stared at the number on the screen. $217. That's what was left of 4 years of saving, 4 years of missed dinners, worn-out shoes, and skipped vacations. I closed my laptop. My hands were shaking. My mind split between disbelief and the gut-deep knowing that this wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I confronted them that evening, my voice steady at first, then cracking. "Where's my money?" Seraphine sighed like I was being difficult. Laziel wouldn't meet my eyes. Calantha looked annoyed that I interrupted their dinner. "It's all for the family," my mother said smoothly. "For Calantha's future. She deserves a proper start." I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what could I say that would make them see me? Calantha tilted her head, her smile soft, pitying. "You wouldn't let your own sister start her life feeling like less, would you?" That's when something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. A crack in the ice. A decision forming in the space where trust used to live. Ever been told to just let it go when it felt like everything you worked for was slipping away? I didn't sleep that night. The ceiling in my room became a shifting canvas of questions I couldn't quiet. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the numbers in that account, $217, and felt the weight of every hour I'd worked for it. I replayed my mother's words, Calantha's practiced pity, my father's silence, over and over. The next morning I showed up at the cafe like nothing had happened. That's the thing about being the reliable one. You keep showing up, even when everything inside you is screaming. Rough night? Cressida asked, as she handed me a fresh pot of coffee to refill the tables. I nodded, too tired to lie, too guarded to tell the truth. Something like that. She studied me for a second, her brows pulling together. Let me know if you need to talk. I almost said it then, almost cracked open the whole ugly mess. But I didn't. Because what could I say? My parents stole from me for my sister's wedding? It sounded dramatic, like I was overreacting. And if I'd learned anything growing up, it was that no one likes the girl who makes a fuss. Better to stay quiet, hold it in, be the steady one. I poured coffee. I smiled. I made it through my shift. But on my break, I checked the bank account again. Still empty, still real. I stared at the screen, willing the numbers to change, to tell me I'd misunderstood, that maybe there'd been some mix-up. But the truth sat there, stark and undeniable. And for the first time, I let myself feel it fully. The betrayal, the absolute audacity of it. They didn't even ask. By the end of my shift, something inside me hardened. If they weren't going to do right by me, I'd have to do it myself. I went home that evening determined to confront them again, to demand they fix it. The house smelled like garlic and rosemary, my mother's signature roast chicken, comfort food, like everything was fine. Seraphine greeted me with a smile that felt like a slap. Dinner's almost ready. I'm not hungry, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. We need to talk. Her smile faltered just a beat. Of course, dear, after dinner. No, now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the table. Calantha, perched at the kitchen island, barely looked up from her phone. I crossed my arms, grounding myself. I want the money back, all of it. I need it for tuition. Seraphine's brow lifted like I'd asked for the moon. Vesperine, don't be so rigid. This is a temporary situation. We'll replenish the account in time. I clenched my jaw. In time for what? Graduation? Calantha rolled her eyes. You're being selfish. This is my wedding, a once-in-a-lifetime event. You're going to school. You can take a semester off. It won't kill you. I turned to Laziel. Dad? He sighed, eyes on the table. Maybe we can shift some things around. Later. Later. Always later. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. You took it without asking. That was my money. Seraphine's voice turned sharper. Watch your tone. We did what we had to do for this family. No, I snapped, my voice finally breaking through the years of holding it in. You did what you wanted to do for her, and you expected me to just accept it. The silence that followed was deafening. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. Calantha finally spoke, her tone syrupy and condescending. Ves, you've always been the strong one. You know how to make things work. This is just one little setback. We're family. That word, family, felt like poison on her lips. I left the kitchen without another word, locking myself in my room. For the first time, I let the anger settle, solidify. This wasn't something I could let go. Not this time. I stayed up that night researching, reading articles on financial abuse, on legal rights. I didn't know if there was anything I could do, but I was done being silent. The next day, I skipped my shift at the cafe and went to the bank. I sat across from a polite woman named Marjorie, who wore glasses on a chain around her neck and spoke in careful, measured tones. I'm sorry, she said after pulling up the account. The funds were transferred out last month, to a different family account. I didn't authorize that, I said, my throat dry. She gave me a sympathetic look but shook her head. Since your name is attached to a joint account with your parents, they had legal access. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Can you show me the transfers? She nodded, printing out the statements. I stared at the paper in my hands. There it was, the proof, every cent siphoned off, wrapped up in Calantha's dream day. Marjorie cleared her throat gently. If you're concerned about this, I'd recommend consulting with someone. Legal aid, maybe. I nodded, standing slowly. Thank you. Walking out of the bank, I realized how naive I'd been. I trusted them. I believed they'd look out for me. But I was done playing the role they'd cast for me. They might have taken my money, but I still had my voice, and for once, I intended to use it. Ever trusted someone so much that when they broke it, you questioned everything? The days after the bank visit were quiet, outwardly at least. I went to work, I came home, I kept my head down. But inside, something relentless was building. A pulse under the surface that wouldn't let me sleep at night. Every time I saw Calantha post a new update about her wedding, the tasting menu she couldn't decide on, the string quartet she was considering, my chest tightened. Each caption ended with a flourish. So blessed, so grateful, like she hadn't just stolen my future for a party. I thought about confronting her directly, tearing into her the way she deserved. But I knew how that would go. She'd play the victim, my mother would play mediator, my father would play invisible. I wouldn't win a shouting match in a house built on silence. So, I did what I do best. I kept my head down, and I watched. At the cafe, Cressida noticed something was off. She always did. "Want to talk about it?" she asked during a lull, wiping down the counter beside me. I hesitated. This time I didn't brush her off. "My parents took my college fund," I said flatly. "Used it for my sister's wedding." Her hand froze mid-wipe. "You're kidding." I shook my head, eyes on the coffee pot. "Nope." Her mouth opened, closed, then she leaned in, voice low. "Vesperine, that's financial abuse." The words landed harder than I expected. Financial abuse. I'd read about it in articles late at night, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a different way. "I don't even know what to do," I admitted. "They act like I'm being selfish for caring." "That's the point," she said, leaning back. "They make you feel like you're the problem for standing up for yourself." I nodded slowly. I'd felt that squeeze my whole life, the subtle pressure to be smaller, quieter, less demanding. "You should talk to someone legal," Cressida added, "or do something they can't ignore." Her words stayed with me long after my shift ended. That night, I sat on my bed, laptop open, staring at the screen without really seeing it. I thought about all the times I'd let things slide. The birthdays spent cleaning up after Calantha's messes, the holidays where my gifts were an afterthought, but hers were celebrated like she'd won the lottery. And the fund, my fund. 4 years of work, gone without even a conversation. I clicked on a tab I'd opened days ago but hadn't had the nerve to revisit. Small claims court. The words felt too big, too final, but the more I read, the clearer it became. I printed the financial statements Marjorie from the bank had given me, highlighting the transfers. I made copies of text messages, screenshots from family group chats where my mother had discussed wedding payments without mentioning my name. A thin line of proof in a sea of betrayal. I wasn't ready to file anything. Not yet. But the seed was planted. 2 weeks later, Calantha threw her bridal shower. Of course, it was hosted at our parents' house. The lawn was a tapestry of pastel tablecloths and overpriced decorations, the kind of setup that screamed curated joy. I was invited, naturally. Expected to show up, expected to smile, but I stood at the edge of the lawn, watching Calantha glow under the attention, and I felt something settle in me. During one of the gift openings, she unwrapped a designer handbag from my parents. Seraphine clasped her hands together, beaming. "You deserve the best, darling." The words hit me square in the chest. I took a step back, turned, and walked inside the house. Into the office where I knew my father kept the files. I wasn't sure what I was looking for at first, but then I saw it. An envelope labeled venue payment. Inside was a receipt for the deposit on Calantha's venue, paid in full, with my money. I scanned it, sending a copy to my email. I felt the pulse of something darker than anger, something that tasted like resolve. As I stepped back onto the patio, Calantha caught my eye and waved me over like I was an afterthought. "Smile more, Vess. You look like a thundercloud." I smiled, but it wasn't the kind she expected. Later that night, after the last guest had left, Seraphine cornered me in the kitchen. "You were distant today," she said, too sweet. "Is everything all right?" I turned, resting my hands on the counter behind me. "You know it's not." Her smile didn't waver. "Families make sacrifices." I met her gaze head-on. "Funny how it's always me sacrificing." Her jaw tightened just for a second. Then she patted my arm, as if that settled things. You'll understand when you have children. The audacity of it hit me like a slap. The dismissiveness. The belief that, in the end, I'd fall back into line. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. But that night I drafted an email to the venue, and the florist, and the caterer. I had their payment receipts. I had their contact information. And I was still listed as an authorized name on the joint account those services had come from. I didn't hit send. Not yet. But the draft sat there, waiting. When someone tells you to smile more while stepping on your throat, what do? The draft sat in my inbox for 3 days, just there, hovering like a match over gasoline. I didn't open them. I didn't delete them either. They were a promise to myself, a whisper that I could still fight back, that I didn't have to swallow this injustice like I always had. But the weight of confrontation, of burning bridges that had held up even my fragile sense of family, was heavier than I cared to admit. On the 4th day, Seraphine called me into the living room. Her voice was warm, too warm. "We need to go over some last-minute wedding details," she said, motioning to the dining table where fabric swatches and catering menus were laid out like the spoils of a victory she hadn't earned. I sat stiff across from her. "We need to confirm the final head count," she said, tapping a pen against a guest list. "It's important we have the numbers exact." "I'm not going," I said flatly. The tapping stopped. "What?" Her tone didn't crack, but her eyes narrowed. "I'm not going to the wedding," I repeated. Silence, just the soft hum of the ceiling fan above us. "Don't be dramatic, Vesperine," she said after a beat. "You're family." I met her gaze. "Family doesn't steal from each other." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "It was a temporary borrowing. You're still young. You'll have plenty of time to rebuild." I leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me." "That's not how families work," she said, tone sharpening. "We do what's necessary for each other." "No," I said, voice steady. "You do what's necessary for Calantha." For the first time, Seraphine's composure cracked, just a hairline fracture across her polished surface. She set down the pen, folded her hands neatly. "I know this is hard for you," she said in the kind of voice that makes your skin crawl, "but sometimes the greater good requires sacrifice." I laughed, quiet, bitter, and somehow I'm always the sacrifice. She leaned in, softening her tone again, the master manipulator. "You've always been stronger than your sister. She's not built for struggle the way you are." The room seemed to tilt. That line, that twisted praise, the same line she'd fed me for years when I gave up things for Calantha. Birthdays, holidays, even little things like the last piece of cake, the larger bedroom. "You're stronger." It had always been her way of turning my pain into virtue. I stood. "I won't be there." She called after me, but I didn't stop. I needed air. I found myself at the cafe again. It was my day off, but I needed to be anywhere but home. Cressida was behind the counter, restocking pastries. "You look like you've been through a war," she said, handing me a muffin without asking. "It feels like it," I muttered, picking at the wrapper. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Did you talk to them?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "Same lines. I'm stronger. I can handle it." Cressida exhaled slowly, pushing a coffee toward me. "You know, strength doesn't mean letting people walk all over you." "I know," I said softly, but the words felt hollow. She tapped the counter. "You ever think about what happens if you don't push back? What happens 5 years from now? 10? When they need something else from you?" That landed harder than I expected. The future stretched out before me like a mirror, showing a life spent carrying the weight of someone else's dreams. I left the cafe that afternoon feeling heavier, but clearer. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the pattern, the slow bleed of my self-worth, cut piece by piece every time I stayed silent. That evening, I opened the email drafts. I reread the words I'd written, adjusted the tone, made sure everything was clear, unemotional. Just facts. Just the truth. I hovered over the send button. But something stopped me. Not fear. Not hesitation. I needed one more thing. Something that would leave no room for denial. I went back to my father's office, late at night, when everyone else was asleep. I rifled through the folders again, this time with a sharper eye. There it was, a copy of the contract with the venue. In the fine print, the cancellation clause. Full refund only if cancelled 30 days prior. The wedding was 35 days out, just inside the window. I scanned it, sent it to myself. I did the same with the caterer's contract, the florist's. Every receipt tied to my drained savings. I closed the drawer quietly, stood in the dark office, heart pounding. They'd taken my money. I was going to take their day. The next morning, over breakfast, Calantha waltzed into the kitchen, phone in hand, glowing. "Darius and I finalized the honeymoon plans," she announced. "Bali for 2 weeks. Private villa, ocean view, all the perks." Seraphine clapped, delighted. Laziel smiled vaguely over his coffee. I sat across from them, watching this perfect little tableau. The chosen daughter, the doting mother, the absent father. Calantha turned to me, smirking. "You really should smile more, Vess. You're going to look miserable in the photos." I smiled, but it wasn't the kind she expected. What would you do if they pushed you one step too far? I've always believed revenge doesn't need an audience. The best kind comes quietly. No fireworks, no screaming matches. Just a shift in the ground beneath your feet until the people who stood so tall start to stumble. The morning I sent the emails, it rained. One of those slow, steady spring rains that soaks into the earth. No thunder, no lightning, just persistent. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling at my elbow, rereading each draft one last time. The subject line was simple. Regarding upcoming wedding services, request for cancellation and refund. I attached copies of the contracts, the receipts paid with my money, and referenced the cancellation clauses. Polite, professional, final. With one breath, I pressed send. 3 emails, 3 little dominoes. And I waited. It took 24 hours for the first reply. The florist. "Hello, Vesperine. We've processed your cancellation request and initiated the refund as per contract terms. Best wishes." I smiled. Next came the venue. A longer message, more formal. "We've canceled your reservation and will process the refund within 10 business days. 2 down." The caterer followed, expressing regret, but complying. I sat there, letting the quiet satisfaction settle in. It wasn't rage. It wasn't explosive. Just right. The next 2 days passed in silence. No calls from the vendors, no word from my family. It felt like walking a tightrope, knowing the safety net was gone but trusting my balance. On the 3rd day, it started. Seraphine's voice carried down the hall, sharp and rising. "What do you mean the venue canceled?" I stayed in my room, door closed, heart pounding. I heard her call the caterer next. "We've been planning this for months. There must be a mistake." I pressed my ear to the door. Laziel's voice, low, bewildered. "Check the bank account." The hollow sound of footsteps, the thud of a chair scraping back. More silence. Then a shout, sharper this time. "She canceled it!" A door slammed. Heavy, deliberate footsteps down the hall. A knock at my door. Not loud, controlled. I opened it. Seraphine stood there, a fury beneath her polished exterior. She didn't shout. That wasn't her style. Her voice was soft, deadly. "What did you do?" I met her eyes. I took back what was mine. Her nostrils flared. "You've ruined your sister's wedding." "No," I said, steady. "I stopped funding it." She stepped closer, lowering her voice like we were conspiring. "You can't undo this. There's still time to fix it. We can move the money back, make the calls." I shook my head. "The money's gone, Mom. Spent. And what's left? That's mine." Her jaw clenched. "You're going to tear this family apart over a party?" I tilted my head. "Funny. I thought you did that when you stole from me." She stared at me, the silence stretching long. Then she turned, stormed down the hall, calling for Laziel. I closed my door, leaning against it as my heart raced. But this time, the fear didn't swallow me whole. It wasn't over. That evening, Calantha showed up at my door, cheeks flushed, eyes shining with disbelief. "You're insane," she snapped before I could speak. "You think this makes you look good?" I folded my arms, leaned against the frame. "I think it makes me whole again." Her lip curled. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Darius's family is flying in from out of state. We have deadlines, Vez, real responsibilities. You can't just pull the rug out. I felt the familiar pang of guilt, but I pushed it down. You pulled the rug out from under me when you drained my college fund. Calantha scoffed, crossing her arms tightly across her chest. It's not the same. It's exactly the same, I said calmly. You wanted your fairy tale. I wanted a future. She stared at me like she couldn't recognize the person standing in front of her, like she expected me to fold, to apologize. But I didn't. I'll fix it, she snapped, turning on her heel. I'll make it work without you. I let her go. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing slow, steady. The house felt like a storm brewing, tension in every corner, but I felt lighter. The fallout wasn't just at home. I heard through a mutual friend that word was spreading, that people were talking, whispering. The vendors must have said something. Small towns are like that. Stories ripple outward. I didn't post anything. Didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. Cressida texted me one afternoon. Saw the post about Calantha's wedding cancellation. You good? I replied, better than ever. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. The wedding was still scheduled, technically. But with no venue, no caterer, no florist, it wasn't much of a wedding anymore. I knew Calantha would scramble, lean on Darius's family, maybe even pull it together. But it wouldn't be the day she'd pictured. It wouldn't be the day they'd stolen my future to fund. And that was enough. For now. Ever wonder what happens when the quiet one finally speaks? The first sign that my quiet strike had rippled beyond our house came from the local coffee shop. Not the cafe where I worked, but the one Calantha favored, where she could be seen, adored, recognized. I walked in one afternoon to grab a coffee, thinking I could lose myself for a while, but the barista, Jamie, someone I barely knew, looked up as I ordered. You're Calantha's sister, right? I hesitated. Yeah. Jamie smirked, leaned in like sharing a secret. Guess the wedding's off, huh? I blinked. Who told you that? Jamie shrugged, sliding the coffee across the counter. Small towns, people talk. I took the coffee, thanked him, but inside my pulse was racing. This wasn't just about the wedding unraveling quietly within our home. Word was out. The narrative was spreading without me having to lift a finger. When I got home that evening, the energy in the house was different. Tense. Like everyone was holding their breath. Seraphine was on the phone in the living room, her voice clipped but polite. Yes, of course, I understand. No, this isn't a reflection of the couple. It's a scheduling conflict, nothing more. She hung up, catching sight of me as I stepped into the hallway. Her lips tightened, but she didn't speak. Neither did I. We both knew the truth was too big to fit between us now. Calantha, though, wasn't so contained. She found me later that night, storming into my room without knocking. You think you've won? She hissed. You think ruining my wedding makes you better than me? I closed my laptop slowly, turning to face her. I didn't ruin your wedding. I just stopped paying for it. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. You don't understand what you've done. Darius's family, his mother, they're asking questions. People are pulling out of attending. They think we're some kind of mess. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds like the truth's working faster than I expected. She stepped closer, eyes flashing. You've always been jealous of me. That stopped me. I stared at her, and for the first time, I saw just how deeply she believed it. Jealous? I repeated, incredulous. Of what? Of being second place in my own family? Of watching you get handed everything while I scraped by? She scoffed, folding her arms. It's not my fault you're bitter. I leaned forward, voice low. You stole my future. You drained my savings. You didn't ask. You didn't care. Her face flushed, her mouth opened like she was about to fire back. But then she hesitated. Just long enough for me to see the cracks beneath the surface. You'll regret this, she spat before turning on her heel and slamming the door behind her. But as the echo of that slam faded, something else surfaced. A calm I hadn't felt in weeks. The cracks were spreading, and they weren't in me. It wasn't long before the public fallout escalated. One morning, Cressida sent me a screenshot from the town's private Facebook group. Does anyone know what happened to the Everly wedding? Venue canceled, caterer pulled out. Rumor has it the bride's sister was involved. The thread had dozens of comments, some people speculating, others claiming inside knowledge. I scrolled, scanning for anything explosive, but it was mostly whispers. Enough to build pressure, enough to make Calantha's perfect image shimmer at the edges. I didn't comment. I didn't defend myself. The story had a life of its own now. But the real twist came 2 days later. I got a letter. No stamp, no return address. Just slid under my bedroom door while I was out. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Notice of approval, credit line extension, $15,000. My name was at the top. I froze, reading it over twice, then a third time. The account was new, the lender unfamiliar. I'd never applied for a credit line. I stormed downstairs, clutching the paper, my heart pounding in my ears. Laziel was at the kitchen table, staring into his coffee like it held answers he couldn't find. I slammed the letter down in front of him. "What is this?" He blinked, startled, glancing at the paper. His mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't know about that," he mumbled, voice small. I felt my breath catch in my throat. "You didn't know? It's under my name." He looked away, rubbing his temple. "It must be Seraphine. Or Calantha. They said it was for handling some last-minute things." Rage welled up inside me. "You let them take out a loan in my name?" He flinched, but said nothing. I grabbed the paper, stormed out of the house, my hands shaking. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was theft, identity fraud, and for the first time, I knew exactly how far they were willing to go to keep their illusion intact. I spent the next day at the legal aid clinic in town. The woman there, Mara, listened quietly as I explained everything. The stolen college fund, the canceled wedding, the credit line. When I finished, she leaned back, folding her hands in her lap. "This isn't just family drama," she said. "This is criminal." I swallowed hard. "What do I do?" "You file a fraud claim," she said simply. "You let the authorities handle it." I left the clinic with paperwork in my hand and a fire in my chest. They thought they could keep taking from me, but I was done playing their game. Now I was playing mine. Ever realize too late that drawing a line in the sand wasn't enough? Sometimes you have to burn the whole map. I filed the fraud report that same afternoon. The process wasn't glamorous. It wasn't dramatic. Just me, a stack of paperwork, and a quiet resolve that no one in my family could break this time. The officer who took my statement nodded along, familiar with stories like mine. Too familiar. "This happens more often than you'd think," he said. "Family crossing lines they think don't exist." I signed the last page. They exist now. It didn't take long for word to spread. When the bank froze the credit line, Calantha found out first. She blew up my phone. Calls, texts, voicemails escalating from pleading to rage. "Vess, call me back. We can fix this. You don't have to do this. You're ruining everything." I didn't answer. Seraphine tried next. She showed up at my door, her voice sweet like honey laced with cyanide. "We can resolve this quietly," she cooed. "You don't want to embarrass the family, do you?" I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. "You embarrassed yourself," I said, my voice steady. "You did that the moment you thought I wouldn't fight back." Her smile cracked. "Think about your future." "I am," I replied. "That's why I'm done with all of you." She left without another word. The investigation didn't take long. The paper trail was clear. My name, forged signatures, loan documents. When the charges were filed, Seraphine's silence turned cold. Calantha's voice disappeared altogether. But the real punishment wasn't the legal system. It was the public. The whispers that had rippled through our town became full conversations. People pulled away from them at church, at social gatherings. Darius's family backed out of the wedding entirely. The event never happened. The last I heard, Calantha was scrambling to cover deposits with what little she could salvage. Seraphine sold off some of her jewelry. Laziel retreated deeper into whatever silence he'd always chosen. I didn't show up for any of it. Months later, after the dust had settled, I stood outside the same cafe where all of this had started. Cressida met me with a knowing smile. "You finally look like you can breathe," she said, handing me a coffee. "I finally feel like I can." I'd opened a new account, one with my name only. I enrolled at a different college, paid the tuition myself with what was left from the settlement. It wasn't everything, but it was mine. I built a future on my terms. I never heard from Calantha again. Seraphine sent a single letter, no apology, just regret that I'd forced things this far. I tossed it in the trash. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't what you take away, it's what you leave behind. Walking away from my family wasn't easy, but sometimes, loving yourself means setting boundaries they'll never understand. This is one of those family stories where betrayal runs deep, but healing runs deeper. I've learned that standing up for your future isn't selfish, it's survival. When trust is broken, you owe it to yourself to rebuild stronger. Have you ever had to make a choice between family and self-respect? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of your own family stories, feel free to share where you're watching from. And if you found value in this journey, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life family stories that challenge, inspire, and empower.